Hello, YouTube. Let's talk about Cardfight Vanguard news. So today's stream brings us a bunch of new news about the Lyrical set, namely a bunch of reprints, and also reveals all of the cards for Japan's next tournament promo pack. This is the one for November, December in Japan, and will be getting in English in February and March. We knew ahead of time that this one is going to have the Nightrose Harri orders that every stride deck gets eventually. My hopes for these aren't too high because these orders have never been particularly strong. But promo packs in general tend to have some pretty notable cards in them. So let's get right into it. Starting right off with the Lyrical reprints, we have a full reprint of the Mermaid Ride line, as well as an Overtrigger reprint, of course. Overtrigger Ride line, Overtrigger reprint is assumed, so like whatever. But the Mermaid Ride line, I really appreciate because this is a super generic, super solid ride line that a lot of Lyrical decks use to replace their own personal really bad ride line. So this is pretty great. This is pretty fantastic. Next up, we have a Franset reprint at Triple Rare. Thank God. This card is so generic. It's so useful in so many Lyrical decks. It really, really needed a reprint. Because this card is like $30 at current, and in the past it's gotten as high as $50 a pop. It really, really needed a reprint, really badly. So very glad to see this. Then we have an art reveal of the Fennel LSR, as well as a supply set for the new Fennel as well. With all that, that is it for the Lyrical news. So let's get into the promo pack. Let's start off with the 3 reprints for this promo pack. For the reprints, we have Daffodil's Pelagia, Buster Barrage, and the Undercover Dog that I cannot remember the name of. Really appreciate the Pelagia reprint because this means we'll be able to get Pelagia in foil. It was like the one card in the Daffodil deck that you couldn't get in foil before. So now you can. That's pretty nice. Buster Barrage is a decently old card that's seeing a lot of play in Vase Rigor, so that's pretty cool to see. And I think the Undercover Dog is a similar situation to Pelagia, where it's like the one card that you couldn't get in higher rarity at this point. So also really appreciate that this can now be constant in foil. Let's get into the actual new cards though. Alright, so first up we have a new promo boss card for Dragon Empire. This is Pure Spear Dragon Zelgogan. So when it's placed on Vanguard Circle, you get a Grade 2 or less card from your drop and call it to rear. And if you call it a Nymph or Hermit, you reduce the next counterblast cost you pay for it by CB1. Oh, the text is a bit off screen. There we go. As always, thank you to Kyra Starkblade for these translations. That's where I'm getting these translations from. All right. So then, Auto Vanguard. When you play Wondrous Melodies, which is the order card associated with the Nymph sub-engine, you search your deck for up to 1 Nymph or Hermit, call it to rear, and then if you search your deck, you shuffle your deck. And then at the end of its battle, you can either counterblast 1 or put 2 Wondrous Melodies from your drop on the bottom of your deck. And you get to stand this card, and it gets power plus 5k and drive -2. And if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, it also gets drive +1 until end of battle. So the Nymph stuff was like one of those sub engines that they do that's like doesn't need any specific Vanguard to technically work with anything, and I can technically do something that's decent like offensively. But like no one really uses any of these. So like if they're going to continue printing these and they're not going to make them good enough to actually see play, I do feel like it's a better baseline for one of these promo bosses if you like make it the boss card for that sub engine. However, this so that gives us a baseline of 5 attacks because the Nymph engine gets a 5th attack. The grade 2 Nymph, which gets plus 5k if you played Wondrous Melodies this turn, when it attacks a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, at the end of that battle, you can counterblast 1 and retire a front row Lightning Legend Hermit Ryodo, which is another grade 2. And you stand it, and Ryodo is on place, counterblast 1, search your deck for a Wondrous Melodies. So that's another counterblast cost you can reduce by the first effect of this card. They also have a restanding booster among the Nymph names, and Wondrous Melodies itself is just EB2, look top 5, and get a normal unit with Nymph in its card name. Not super fantastic because there's only 2 Nymph names you really want to be using in the engine here, so like it's really not great. The power numbers here aren't fantastic either. Like this boss card is doing a lot to try and save those Nymph cards, but like it's definitely not enough to make anything playable yet. At the very least, because it's in Dragon Empire, it has access to the Vergilla Bride line, and there's a lot of great choose you have to run at baseline, because both the front row rear guards are grade 2s, so like those are things that you can grab off top 7 with Shooting Star Vergilla. Yeah. I don't see this doing anything. It's kind of crap. It's not very good at all. But it's probably a way better baseline than most of these promo bosses I've gotten. So, it's something. Then we have a Marlene promo. This is actually a Ride-Line piece. So I'm just gonna remind myself real quick what the Marlene Ride-Line Grade 2 at current does. So the original Ride-Line Grade 2 for Marlene was just bounce a rear guard and call it to rear, which is nothing particularly useful. However, you did require its name to use the original Grade 1 Ride-Line piece, which was call a Grade 2 or less normal unit from hand, and then you get to search your deck for a card with the same name and put it into hand. Which was pretty good for being able to, if you opened a PG, you would be able to go call down a PG, add another PG to hand, and then later you would use a bounce effect to bounce that PG back to hand, or do it that turn with like Fanset or something. And that requires the original Grade 2's name, which makes this card a bit weird. But you could use like the Mermaid Ride-Line Grade 1, because that one doesn't require you to actually have a Mermaid Grade 3 in your Ride-Line, and a Marlene might be a mermaid herself. No, Sedna also requires her to be ridden on top of by Aqua. This card's very strange. Like, I don't know what we're supposed to be doing with this card, because it has this first effect that's been wrote upon by a Grade 3 with Marlene's card name, called to rear, which is very clearly a Ride-Line effect. But there's no Ride-Line for this to fit into. Unless next Pro Pack, they're going to give you another Marlene card, which is a new Ride-Line Grade 1. Very strange stuff. Don't quite understand what the concept we're supposed to be going with here is. Okay, but other effects are, if you have a grade 3 or greater Marlene Vanguard, it gets power plus 5k, and then if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, it gets another power plus 5k for power plus 10k total. And this is also active on your opponent's turn, so like it's much harder to beat into if your opponent wants to clear it. However, it is actually a self-mirager, so that's not particularly like that big of a deal. At the end of the battle that it attacked, if you have a grade 3 or greater Marlene Vanguard, you can throw into Soul and put a Marlene from your drop or bind at the bottom of your deck, and if you do, draw a card. So this is a pretty solid card. It's a plus 10k attacker that, like, at later stages in the game is going to be able to mirage itself to draw a card. That's pretty solid stuff. It's just the Ride-Line part of it in this first effect is, like, hard to get a grasp on what exactly we're supposed to be doing with it. Then we have a piece of Daikaiser support. So this is Dimensional Robo Diecrawler. I think I cut out the name for this one. Did I cut out the name for all of them? I don't know. So 2 effects. This is a grade 2. When it's discarded from hand during your turn, if you have a Dimensional Robo Vanguard, energy charge 2. As I recall, Dimensional Robo has a lot of stuff it wants to use energy on. So like some extra energy charging is actually pretty appreciated, as far as I can recall. And then when it's in the soul and your Vanguard becomes standby card ability, if you have two dimensional Robo Vanguards, you can bind this card from your soul, and your Vanguard's drive becomes 1 until end of turn. And then if your Vanguard D-Legion this turn, all of your front or rear guards with dimensional Robo in its card name gets power plus 5k. So this is really good. So for one, this means that the thing where on restand you get to have one drive is something you're able to do multiple times per game. But also, the effect to bind Goyusha, that effect is drive plus 1. It doesn't set drive to 1. So you set drive to 1 with this, and then you do that. Wait. Does that work? No, that doesn't even work, does it? Does that even work? Does that even work? Because the drive set to 1 is a part of the user's effect to restand, right? Yes, it is. So you can't use this, set your drive to 1, and then give it drive plus 1. That doesn't work. Huh. Weird. Unless I'm misunderstanding a ruling here. Like, when I first read this card, it's like, oh, this lets you get 2 drives on your second swing once per game. That's pretty good. But no, it seems like it's actually just you can have your drive set to 1 more than once per game. And you also get front row buff, which is pretty good. But like, not as good as I initially thought. Yeah, this card seems, if I'm understanding this correctly, this card just seems all right now. Doesn't seem particularly impressive at all anymore. All right, last promo before we get into the Nightrose and Harri orders. This is Judgment Dragon Vigaldeel. So this is for Keter. It has that classic non-encounter effect of if you have a Vanguard with only Shadow Paladin, its card name, this card is only from Shadow Paladin, which is very relevant for Shadow Paladin specifically because it means you can get it off Dira. Very, very strong to be able to be a target for Dira. And this card has a couple effects. So when it's placed on rear, if you have a Vanguard Blaster, you can put a card from hand into soul, draw a card, and this gets power plus 5k. That's very good because Phantom Blaster Overlord is one of those encounter decks that really wants to get its initial form into the soul so that I can just ride line Overlord. And this is a really nice in-archetype way of doing that. Currently is just kind of depending on Coco to accomplish that, but this is a much more efficient way of doing that. And then second effect is when it would be retired for the cost of your Blaster Vanguard. It's regarded as retiring 2 units. And then when this is retired from rear by the ability of your Blaster Vanguard, you can Energy Blast 3. Choose a Blaster Dark on rear, and it gets auto rear guard once per turn. When this attacks, this unit performs drive checks until end of that battle. At the end of that battle, retire this unit. So, anyone familiar with Phantom Blaster Overlord and how that deck currently plays might recognize these effects because these are Cleodna's effects. And Cleodna is like kind of like the backbone of how that entire archetype works at current. It's a 4 attack deck with 4 drive checks. However, previously, Cleodna was not Shadow Paladin, so you can't get it off Dira. It required you to discard for that effect. And did not have the effect also on it to get the Phantom Blaster Dragon from your hand into Soul so that Overlord has its additional critical. Also very importantly, Cleodna had a opponent's grade is greater or greater restriction. This does not. So you get to do 4 attacks with 4 drive checks on when your opponent's on grade 2, which is kind of absurd. This is really, really good. This is an incredible card. Like, I'm not sure if it'll allow. I don't think it'll allow Phantom Blaster Overlord to play with the big boys, but like, it at least makes it like a competent scam deck. Like, this is really strong. This is very powerful. All right, and for the Nightrose and Harri order, we're just going to go over them at the same time because, like, as is often the case with Nightrose and Harri cards, they're just the same card. So it is it's an order that can be. So it first has the effect that all of these orders have had, which is when it's discarded from your hand while paying the cost for Stride. You can choose one of your Vanguards or Hearts, and until end of turn, reduce the next counterblast cost you pay for that card's ability by 1. Um, and then it also has the effect that it can be played from drop. You need the crest in play, and you bind this card and perform one of the following. So it's look at the top 7 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 card from among them and discard it, shuffle your deck, and your Vanguard gets power plus 5k until end of turn. Or you choose a card from drop, call it to rear, and it gets power plus 5k. And for the Harri one, you just replace drop with soul. So it's look top 7, put a card from among them into soul, or call a card from soul. These are really good. So like one of the problems with the previous orders is that you had to choose between using them for their counterblast reduction by discarding them, or using them for their from hand effect. You don't with these. You just get both. Which is really, 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 really good. Good deck thinning, good setup. Both these decks really, really appreciate having a bit less pressure on their counterblast spending. Because like both these decks were in G, both these Striders were very much designed with the fact that G had an absurd amount of counter charge. Like Nightrose was very dependent on Grenache so that I could spend all the counterblast it needed to build its board. Grenache was printed for a reason. And Harri wasn't even good in G, but Harri was very dependent on having a bunch of cards that, like, when they were called off Soul, would call another thing from Soul for free in exchange for it going back to Soul at the end of turn. So you would just like call it one, and then you would call it a whole board. And neither of those decks have those things in D series. So they were really expensive for them to build boards, and it was really, that was like probably one of the, for Harri especially, that was a big problem because Harri needed so much counterblast. Like all of its multi-attacks needed counterblast, and it also needed to spend counterblast to build board. So that was a really big problem. And it wasn't fantastic for Nightrose either, because like the nature of both Magia and Hollow is that you need to mirage away your board, which means you can't like maintain your board even in matchups where you're not dealing with a bunch of retire. So it like made things really annoying. And these just very cleanly resolve those issues. Very, very good cards. Huge deals for both of these decks. Like these cards are really, really good. This sort of like free board building is something that so many decks would absolutely kill for. And it's on cards that also allow you to reduce your counterblast spending, which is just really, really fantastic. Fantastic cards. Cannot say that enough. Just really, really good. So yeah. Before we finish up, we have a few cards of the day to go over, so let's go over that real quick. Alright, so we're going to be real quick on going over these cards of the day because there's just nothing notable here. So we have a Grade 2 that when it's placed on rear during the battle phase, you can EB3, choose one of your rears, and during this turn, that unit and this unit get power plus 5k. This is one of the only ones that might be notable. I'm not super familiar with the decks that can make good use of this, but this is like a power plus 10k spread, so maybe, but being a Grade 2 is kind of, like, this sort of thing would be, like, much better on, like, I feel like a Grade 1 in a deck that, like, calls a column, like, is restricted to calling column. Like, being an 18k booster is, like, a lot more notable than being a 20k attacker. And then Grade 1, if you have a Grade 3 or greater Vanguard, you can rest this card and Soul Charge 1. This is a card they would have, this is literally a card they released in Dark Regulars. Actually, a worse version of a card they released in Dark Regulars in 2012. This is freaking Yellow Bolt, I think it was called. Yeah. Yellow Bolt was a Dark Irregulars card from BTO7. That was rest this card. If you have a Dark Irregulars Vanguard, Soul Charge 1. This is the worst version of that. This card's really bad. And then another batch of cards today. So we have Grade 3. When it attacks a Grade 3 or greater Vanguard, you can Soul Charge 1, and if you Soul Charge a normal unit, during this battle, this unit gets power plus 5k. Not any good at all. You would expect at least power plus 10k from a Grade 3 attacker. And then Grade 1, Continuous Guardian. If there's a trigger unit on your Guardian Circle, this gets shield plus 5k. We have way better shield plus 10k cards in Lyrical, so like not a chance. Nothing good among these cards today. Like complete jank, complete chaff here. So yeah, that's going to be it for me for today. Next week, next week's exciting. Next week's exciting because next week is Sienna support. Next week is 4 cards for Sienna, 3 cards for Felty Rose, and also a triple rare generic Blitz order. Now, they say it's generic, however, they're revealing it alongside Sienna. And Sienna really likes Blitz orders. So, I'm sure it'll work generally, but like, I'm pretty sure that's going to be a Blitz order that's like particularly designed to help Sienna function. Personally, I would really like for that Blitz to be a Dreamblade type card that lets you play another Blitz. Or they could like put an effect on Sienna that lets her play multiple Blitzes a turn. I feel like that one of the best things you could do to help Sienna out is let her play multiple Blitzes in a turn. Because that's a deck that just really wants to like guard as much as possible without actually calling cards to Guardian Circle. So more cards that help Sienna achieve that would be a really big deal. Honestly, if they just give Dress Up Sienna like an effect that's like you can play any number of Blitz orders, fuck it. I would really appreciate that. I think that would be neat. I think Sienna should be allowed that privilege. I think Sienna should be allowed to completely ignore the Blitz order limits. All right. That's going to be it for me. I'll see you guys next time. This is Hunter Surge, signing off.